There are other headlines to cover as well, including politics. With 2 weeks to go until the Iowa caucuses, it appears Newt Gingrich's campaign is on the decline.
Right, it's a little early to say that.
Oh,
it's a little early to say that.
No, I just said it appears.
There's a leveling out.
And I didn't smile.
No, there's a leveling out.
I just read it.
Up, down. There's some strange things are going on out there. That's very objective.
The latest public policy polling shows the former speaker slipping into third place in the Republican presidential field. That's an 8-point drop in just 1 week. Ron Paul now leads the pack with 23% support. It's interesting. Mitt Romney is 3 points behind Paul, still within the margin of error. Gingrich has been in a free fall over the past 2 weeks, a 13-point drop from over that time, from 27% in early December to now 14%.
Now, we obviously, I know this will come as a shock to you guys, but we've obviously been tough. I've been kind of tough on the speaker. But let me say in the speaker's defense, Mark Halprin, and Americans need to understand what's happening in Iowa, why these numbers are going down. There has been a steady barrage of anti-Newt ads coming from all sides, from Mitt's super PAC, from Ron Paul's super PAC. I don't know that any politician, and again, I think he has many flaws, but let's be fair about this. I don't know that any politician could withstand the barrage of negative attacks that Newt has handled over the past 2 weeks.
And he's not really fought back very aggressively, either by going on the offensive against any of the people he's running against or by defending himself in a particularly effective way. Iowa now is something like we've never seen. There's 6 candidates at this point who could do very well in Iowa. It's possible that all 6 of them have the potential to win. Separating first to 6 in all the polls I've seen is very close. Gingrich and Romney and Paul are not really doing the classic thing of fighting for Iowa. They're doing other things last week. The other 3, Bachmann and Perry and Santorum, are barnstorming Iowa, and that's making things very tough.
And when these numbers come off of Gingrich, they don't go to Romney for the most part. They're going to Bachmann. They're going to Perry. They're going to Santorum. And I've been predicting a second surge by Michelle Bachmann. Are you seeing it out in Iowa?
Yeah, you know, I was there for basically the last 10 days, and over the weekend was with Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann on their bus tours, both drawing nice crowds in very small places. She, in particular, getting very big, very enthusiastic response.
So you're sensing momentum.
There are people that are really interested in hearing her message, and she was hammering Ron Paul all day long for some comments that he'd made on television about her and her views of Muslims. But she seized on that. She was getting a lot of enthusiasm from the crowd she saw. And Rick Perry, his crowd's a little bit smaller, but still solid, still healthy. So people who are out there, they want to hear these guys have to say. Yeah.
We have the possibility of Mitt Romney in the high teens, Michelle Bachmann in the high teens, Ron Paul in the high teens, Newt Gingrich in the high teens. I mean, this could be a 4, 5, 6-way tie.
It could be, and that may lay up very well for Mitt Romney. As long as no one comes out of Iowa, even if he doesn't finish first, if Iowa's a muddle, I think Mitt Romney's in a very strong position. So somebody's going to need to surge here, and somebody probably will.
And to Mark's point, I mean, it's fascinating how Gingrich, not only, as Mark says, not fighting back, not driving a match, just not in Iowa, and raising a lot of people wondering why he is not actively campaigning there. He was in
Washington this week.
Was in Washington for the weekend. Almost everybody else, at least, even Romney, who left the state on Friday to go to South Carolina, even he did an event after the debate. No Newt Gingrich.
Why isn't Newt out there?
Missing person.
Why isn't Newt out there? Because if Newt wins Iowa, I mean, it puts him in good shape for South Carolina. But if he doesn't, it's a battle. What's going on?
Not just a battle; it could be over for him if he doesn't do very well in Iowa, depending on the outcome. It's not really clear. He schedules himself the way he wants to be scheduled, and he will be there after Christmas. But he may be making a real miscalculation, both in terms of not fighting back and in terms of not making a full court press in Iowa, because everyone in Iowa, there's a little bit of going after Romney, but the other 4 are really going after Newt. Yes. So Romney is getting something of a free pass, and because they all, as you said, Newt's vote goes to all of them.
All of them.
It doesn't go to Romney, so they're trying to take it. It's
actually best case scenario, and then you go to New Hampshire, where just like I think Bachmann's going to surge in Iowa, I still think Huntsman's going to end up around 20, 21, 22% of New Hampshire. You have him up there, you have Gingrich up there, you have Ron Paul up there, and you have Romney maybe winning by a few points. It's Mitt Romney's. This is his best case scenario.
Well, and it's possible that Mitt Romney may still, actually, because of all this, if it turns out there's a ceiling on Ron Paul's support for various reasons, because he's not going to be able to draw that many establishment voters, it's possible Romney's just going to win Iowa. They are working very hard out there. I mean, they are phone banking harder, spending more money on phone banking and more hours on phone banking than anybody else, very quietly but very aggressively doing the work out there. They are in with both feet out there, and it's possible he's now polling around over 20%. If he's up at 26, 27, 28%, which would only be a couple points higher than he did in 2008, Mitt Romney could very easily win the Iowa caucuses, and then effectively, I mean, assuming he doesn't stumble in New Hampshire, the race could be over.
So, Mika, I mean, why this is happening, if people at home are watching and saying, boy, this sure sounds a lot different than it did 10 days ago, the Romney campaign's worst case scenario is Mitt Romney versus a conservative. If it's Mitt Romney versus 3 or 4 conservatives, Mitt Romney does very well. And when Gingrich was in the high 30s, it was a nightmare scenario. Now, everything sort of leveled out.
A couple other things that happened over the weekend. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley endorsing Mitt Romney, and the Des Moines Register putting their support behind Mitt Romney as well.
Did you see Newt? You see Newt on Face the Nation?
I did. I saw his first time ever almost sort of taking responsibility for the Freddie Mac payments. Not really, he blamed it on his campaign. But that's okay.
Well, I gotta say, and
I guess that's what you do.
People don't. I know people aren't going to understand this. Did you guys see Face the Nation?
Oh, sure.
You see Face the Nation?
No, sure.
I'll tell you. I disagreed with everything he said, especially about judges, which I think is really dangerous. But that said, and this is what people don't understand, that I could disagree with something, but actually go, wow.
I know what's going to happen.
That was a good political move on his part. Newt Gingrich looked as good and as confident and as calm as I've seen him in years with Bob Schieffer.
It's a very good performance.
I thought it was a great performance, and it's going to play well in Iowa. If Iowa saw that, he just kept going back to the 10 Commandments and kept going back to
he gave a history lesson.
Federal judges, and exactly, he gave a history.
And he's talking about fundamental change, radical change, in a way that a lot of people in the Republican Party want.
So let's explain
and Mitt
it.
Romney just doesn't do.
Yeah.
So explain what Gingrich is talking about.
Well, I think he's talking about, I mean, look, this is the thing that appeals to conservatives who think that the country has gone very far off on the wrong track. And he, because of the fact that he's seen, some people disagree with this, but he has the image, at least in the Republican Party, as being a big thinker, these notions of trying to drive, root and branch reform. I'm going to set up an alternative Social Security system. We're going to set up an alternative Medicare system.
But let's talk about this case, because it is radical. He's talking about doing away with possibly the Ninth Circuit. He's talking about firing judges. He's talking about using federal marshals who are used to protect judges to drag them to Congress to explain some of their decisions.
Yes, it was funny, during the debate on last week on Thursday, there was a moment when Ron Paul started talking about separation of powers, when people were talking about the courts. And I tweeted that everyone else on stage looked puzzled. Newt Gingrich is kind of the avatar of that. Rick Perry's talking about ending lifetime tenure for judges whose decisions on social issues he disagrees with.
It's
all of the members, this attack on the courts, it is like, really, guys, this is a separate branch of government. You're not allowed to do these things. It's crazy radical talk.
Andrea Mitchell, I want to play a clip for those that didn't see it yesterday. And again, I don't like the message, but the way Gingrich delivered it yesterday is going to appeal to a lot of people in the base. Watch this.
One of the things you say is that if you don't like what a court has done, that Congress should subpoena the judge and bring him before Congress and hold a congressional hearing. How would you enforce that? Would you send the Capitol Police down to arrest him?
If you had to. Or you'd instruct the Justice Department to send a U.S. Marshal. But are judges above the rest of the Constitution? Or are judges one of the 3 co-equal branches?
But isn't the other side of that, are the rest of us above the Constitution and obeying the law? I mean, at some point you have to say this is a nation of laws, and we all have to.
We do, but I'll go back to Lincoln, who people generally think respected the law. Lincoln explicitly instructed his administration to not enforce Dred Scott. And he said flatly, it's the law of the case, not the law of the land, and it's in his first inaugural.
You know, just looking at that. And Andrea, I have been around this guy for a long time. Newt Gingrich is at his worst when things are going best. But when his polls are dropping, as they are right now, there was something zen about him. It was a command performance, despite the fact what he said scared the hell out of me.
It's just crazy.
He's in his zone, and you're absolutely right. When he is on the ropes, he gets this sort of supernatural calm about his statements, and he dresses it all up with enough history. When he talks about the Dred Scott case, that is a brilliant way of explaining his attack on the judiciary, and putting himself with Lincoln. It sort of enlarges him as well. You know, I think this is going to be very appealing, as you noticed with the debate last week. This kind of attack on the judiciary is very, very good with the base, and I think this is going to help him perhaps carve out his own area in Iowa, where, as you are saying, he is under fierce attack.
Can I say one thing? It didn't work so well for FDR when he did the court packing plan. Taking on the judiciary, the independent source of third branch of government, is also risky. Americans believe in that. It just seems to me this is not without some risk.
I think Americans are so angry, Richard, at every institution. Look at the polling. I think that this is a more desperate, perhaps not, obviously not a more desperate economic time, but boy, the public anger at all institutions, and especially the conservative base, the anger at the judiciary is pretty strong.
I think it could help. I think Mark Halperin could help him with a portion of the conservative base in Iowa, because I'm part of the conservative base and it scares the hell out of me. But a portion it could help him with. But in a general election, this would be a nightmare for Republicans.
I'm not necessarily. I'm not going to defend it on legal terms.
Well, the speaker basically said if Ike didn't like Brown v. Board of Education, if Eisenhower didn't like Brown v. Board, then he could have just ignored it and fired the judges.
But here's the element of it that I think strikes a chord, maybe even in a general election, which is the judiciary should be a co-equal branch, not a super branch that's able to trump what the will of the other two branches. And in some of the decisions he cited, and in some of the reaction of a lot of Americans, the courts have become out of control. They're too powerful. They make law that neither the executive nor the legislative branches endorse.
And what Newt did, which is what he is so good at doing, he picked out one example of a judge who said, if you say the word benediction at a high school speech, I'm going to jail the superintendent of schools, which, of course, makes 99% of Americans angry, I would guess, but then tries to apply that to everything, including the Supreme Court. By the way, let me say, a very conservative Supreme Court. There's nothing the Ninth Circuit can pass that the Roberts Court isn't going to crush.
And this spring we may see how conservative the Supreme Court is.
Now, there's
some very big decisions.
Exactly. Now, this could play in Iowa, though, and I know we got to go. I'm sorry, but just to put perspective on this could play in Iowa because obviously Newt helped to throw out 3 judges that passed
legalized gay marriage.
That legalized gay marriage, basically rolling over what the legislature had passed.
And as I said, there's a reason why Rick Perry, Michelle Bachmann, why all these conservatives, this is part not as quite as colorful or Florida way as Newt does, but they all attack the judiciary a lot on the stump, and they get good reactions to it. There is a big part of the Republican base, especially Christian conservatives, who feel some of the things that Mark was expressing a second ago. It's very appealing to them, and everyone's going after that resentment out there.
Well, by taking this on in such an extreme way, it kept a lot of questions that should be asked to him about his past away, which was politically brilliant. I listened to it on the radio driving home from Pennsylvania, and had I not been driving, I would have had my head in my hands because I just couldn't believe how well he was spinning this.
Well, but let me say, though,
talk.
Bob Schieffer was right to do what he did.
Well, of course.
To follow this line.
How do you put out a bomb like that and not be asked about it?
I think it was brilliant on Bob's part to not go to all these other scandals that everybody had talked about and focus on that one subject.
Yeah, but he handled it
Bob
really
Schieffer,
well.
Seriously?
They both were good.
They ought to take that on the road. But Bob Schieffer is great.
I love Schieffer. I miss him. All right, coming